Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Chris Taylor, and at the moment, you don't know the difference between me and a hole in the wall. That's fine, and quite frankly, that's one of the main reasons why I decided to start this series in the first place. See, after nearly 3 decades walking and talking on this little blue speck of a planet called Earth, I've realized a few things. A, chocolate bars, while tasty, aren't quite nutritional. 2, it sometimes takes me about an hour that would take a normal person about 5 minutes to make a point on any given subject. And C, when I finally get around to making those points, generally speaking, I'm in the minority of whatever argument is being made.
May have been the losing side. Still not convinced it was the wrong one.
I don't really know why, but I guess I'm just wired a little differently. Either that or I'm just a big fan of the underdog, the side of things that doesn't get nearly enough representation. Luckily for me, this is the internet, and as we all know, it's an absolutely wonderful place to speak one's mind, where everyone is fair and just and kind, and is highly receptive of other people's opinions without being overly judgmental about said arguments.
It's really so stupid.
And there is no better place for me to do what I do. So allow me for now and forever play the role of the devil's advocate, the guy that takes the side no one ever wants to take, to represent those who can't represent themselves. Case in point, the Star Wars prequels. It's the commonly held belief that these are vile, wretched films made out of a lust for money and toy-making abilities, the likes of which we'll never see again. The pacing is all wrong, the plots are convoluted and boring, there are racial stereotypes all over the place, and quite frankly, the world would be a better place if they never existed. And I would be inclined to agree. But here's the thing. I'm gonna let you all in on a little secret. Come a little closer. No, a little closer. The prequels are not that bad. In fact, I'm inclined to say that they're good. Yes, all the problems I listed are present in the prequels, and are huge factors in why they're not nearly as highly regarded as the originals. But these are not new problems in movies. There are plenty of horrendous movies that are ripe with all of these things, and yet, they exist. Hell, in a world where The Room is a movie that exists...
You are lying, I never hit you! You are tearing me apart, Lisa!
Well, that kind of speaks for itself, doesn't it? So where to begin? Where do I start with convincing all of you wonderful people that the prequels were good? It starts with a reveal. Darth Maul, baddest spiky-skulled alien in the galaxy far, far away. At no point in the originals is there a reveal quite as grand as this one. Sure, Darth Vader gets his opening at the beginning of A New Hope, but he's surrounded by stormtroopers who did all the heavy lifting for him. He's covered from head to toe, so you can't see his facial expressions. And he's stiffer than morning wood. Compare that to an angry, red and black-faced, horn-hooded badass who I think it's safe to assume just stood behind those blast doors waiting for the Jedis to show up, ready to single-handedly handle that situation. No backup, no blasters, just one man against 2 Force users. And that lightsaber! Who didn't want a double-bladed instrument of death after seeing that thing in action? Spinning around, thrusting and parrying, and holding up supremely well. It was a thing of absolute beauty. Which brings me to my next point. The lightsaber duels. In all 3 of the prequels, you had amazing fights of skill and cunning. What did the originals have? An old man and a black monstrosity poking at each other, a black monstrosity and an Aryan prince swinging for the fences in confined spaces, and a black monstrosity and an Aryan prince fighting a little bit better than in their last fight. Now here's where you could argue that while the fights themselves may not have been as good as in the prequels, it was the meaning behind those fights that matter more. An old master fighting with his pupil that he failed to turn back to the light. A father and a son duking it out so that the son could rescue his friends. A son trying desperately to show his father that yes, there is still good in him. But I would dispute that, powerful as those messages are, when you see 2 guys square off head to head in a battle to the death, the level of intensity is far greater in the prequels than in the originals. Oh, but Anakin starts off as a whiny little brat in episode 1. How could you ever take Darth Vader seriously when you've seen him as a pissant little kid?
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
Did I not watch the same Star Wars as you guys? The one where Luke spends the first half whining about power converters, not being able to join his friends at space school because he has to help his family continue to survive the harsh realities of living on a planet made entirely of heat, sand, and death? Where the only reason why he wants to leave and find Ben Kenobi in the first place is because a random hologram in an R2 unit bought from glorified slave drivers happened to look pretty and may in fact been the first woman he's seen since Aunt Beru? Seriously, rewatch that movie. There are 2 women and they're both family members. That's why it didn't piss me off about Anakin and Padme. Star Wars has always had that element of love story in there from the very beginning. It just wasn't usually joined with stilted dialogue being spoken by 2 actors who had next to no chemistry together, and quite frankly, that kid with his freaky glares and creepy lines.
She covered the cameras. I don't think she liked me watching her.
Sorry, got off track there. Speaking of tracks, pod racing. All the elements of a space battle thrown in to confirm that yes, Anakin is indeed a damn good pilot. With all the bobs and weaves, the explosions, the devious tactics of Sebulba, the entire sequence was glorious. It was so good that it was licensed to not 1, but 2 great racing games. Episode 1 Racer on N64 and Racer Revenge on PS2 respectively. Oh, but what about all the talk about trade routes and droids? Wasn't it all just a little too political? Let me ask you this. What war isn't at least a little bit about politics? World War I and II, the Civil War, Vietnam, the War on Terror after 9/11, all of them bloody, violent, vicious, and political. Was there too much jibber-jabber about trade routes and policies? Absolutely. But to ignore all politics in a movie with the word war in it from the outset? To me, that would be a travesty.
The ability to speak does not make you intelligent. Now get out of here.
No, Mr. Stay. Mr. called Jar Jar Binks. Mr. your humble servant.
Yes. The great big mistake that's universally hated. Well, almost universally hated, because, quite frankly, I didn't hate Jar Jar. Here's the thing. Star Wars has always been predominantly a kid's movie. When Episode 1 first came out in the summer of '99, I was 12 years old. A kid. Perfect time to see a character who's just a huge bumbling doofus. Loud, annoying, obnoxious. Look, quite frankly, I don't sound much better after a few drinks, so I can't really fault Jar Jar for it. It's also not like the originals escape this aspect either. Ewoks. A good hour of little dudes in little Jim Henson-esque monkey suits jub-jubbing and poking things with sticks. At the very least, Jar Jar could speak English. Now, Attack of the Clones, I will flat out admit, my least favorite of the entire saga. A little too talky and a huge focus on just how creep-tastic that Anakin kid is. However, the idea of a war between clones and droids sounds amazing to me. Plus, bonus points since it was referenced in the originals. Now, as much as Episode 2 drags on, without it, we wouldn't have 2 absolutely amazing Star Wars animated series. The first, which was all 2D shorts until they got a budget to make a 3rd season that was actual episodes, and then, in a post-prequel environment, a CG 6-season set of amazingness! Seriously, it's a great series, and last time I checked, it was still on Netflix, so be sure to check it out when you have a chance. And finally, above all else, the prequels allowed us a little bit more insight into the inner workings of the dark side. We had Senator Palpatine, before he was all varicose-veined and lightning hands, using manipulation instead of raw power to overthrow those who stood before him. You had some truly memorable fights between the Jedi and the Sith, all capped off with this.
Anakin, Chancellor Palpatine is evil! From my point of view, the Jedi are evil! Well, then you are lost!
The entire fight. The entire series being able to be summed up with, we don't agree, so we must destroy each other. What's more poignant than that? And trust me, that line of dialogue will most certainly be a major talking point in another episode of this show. Despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary, I do hope I've managed to show that the prequel trilogy is not nearly as bad as, perhaps, previously imagined. From the badassness of Darth Maul to the badassness of the pod racing in Episode 1, The prequels gave us some legendary action sequences and visuals, and a deeper look into the dark side of the Force. I also hope I brought to light, or at least reminded you all, of how the originals were not quite as flawless either, with Ewoks existing and Luke not being quite so different from Dad Vader at the outset of both of their respective stories. And if you're not a fan of the films, at least we still have the cartoons. Feel free to let me know in the comments section below if there are any points that you disagree with, so that I can prove you wrong.
Boom! Lawyered.
But until next time, and on the topic of the Star Wars prequels, the defense rests.
Awesome. I'm so awesome. Awesome, awesome, and handsome. Awesome. I'm so awesome. What's up, Wheezy? Show off.